Have you ever felt like you're at the mercy of your emotions? Like one bad conversation, one difficult person, or one unexpected setback can throw your whole day off balance. We've all been there. We say things we regret, make choices we didn't mean to make, and let stress take over. And in those moments, we feel anything but free. But what if I told you that emotional freedom isn't about suppressing feelings or ignoring reality? It's about learning how to stand strong no matter what life throws at you. Today, we're going to explore what it means to become unshakable, to master emotional freedom so you can lead yourself and others with clarity, confidence, and purpose. Think about the last time you felt overwhelmed by emotion. Maybe it was frustration after a conversation that didn't go your way. Maybe it was anxiety before taking on something new. Maybe it was anger when someone crossed a line. In those moments, our emotions feel all-consuming. They feel like absolute truth. And because of that, we often let them dictate our actions. We react without thinking, make impulsive decisions, and say things we later wish we could take back. But here's the reality. Emotions are not instructions. They are information. When you touch a hot stove, your body sends an immediate signal, pain. That pain isn't there to control you. It's there to inform you. It tells you, hey, this is dangerous, move your hand. The pain itself doesn't force you to act. It simply delivers a message. You still have control over what you do next. Emotions work the same way. When you feel anger, it's your body's way of saying, something important to me feels threatened. When you feel fear, it's signaling there's uncertainty ahead. Proceed with caution. When you feel sadness, it's telling you you've lost something meaningful and it matters. But too often we misinterpret emotions as orders rather than observations. We get angry, so we lash out. We feel afraid, so we avoid the challenges. We feel sad, so we shut down. And just like that, emotions stop being helpful, they start being harmful, not because they're wrong, but because we're letting them steer the wheel instead of guiding the way. Consider a leader walking into a high-stakes meeting. They feel nervous. Their heart races, their palms sweat, and their mind floods with doubt. They have two choices. They can interpret that nervousness as a directive. I'm not ready, I shouldn't speak up, I might fail. So they stay quiet, hold back, and play small. Or they can see it as data. This matters to me. My body is preparing for something important. They take a deep breath, ground themselves, and step into the moment with confidence. Same feeling, two completely different outcomes. The moment we stop letting emotions dictate our actions and start using them as insights, everything changes. But that requires a shift in mindset. It requires us to pause and ask, what is this emotion trying to tell me, instead of what is this emotion making me do? Because emotions don't control us, they inform us, and how we respond to that information is entirely up to us. Have you ever said something in the heat of the moment that you later regretted? Maybe you fired off an email when you were frustrated, snapped at someone who didn't deserve it, or made a decision based purely on emotion, only to realize moments or hours later that you wish you had handled it differently. This happens to all of us. And it happens because in emotionally charged moments, we react instead of respond. Reactions are instinctive. They happen fast, they're driven by raw emotion, and they feel automatic. But responses require intention, they require awareness, and most importantly, they require a pause. That pause, whether it's a few seconds, a deep breath, or a deliberate moment of reflection, is what separates impulsive action from thoughtful decision-making. It's what gives us the space to shift from emotion-driven reactions to values-driven responses. Think about a moment of tension in your life. Maybe it was a disagreement at work, someone challenged your idea in a meeting, and you felt that surge of frustration. Your body tensed up, your pulse quickened, and your mind immediately raced to defend yourself. In that split second, your instinct was to jump in, to prove them wrong, to make your voice heard. But what if instead of reacting, you paused? What if, instead of letting frustration dictate your words, you took a deep breath, acknowledged the feeling, and gave yourself a moment to process? That pause is where clarity lives. That pause is where emotional freedom begins. Because in that brief moment, something powerful happens. You gain control. You shift from being a passenger to being the driver. You move from unconscious reaction to intentional response. Science backs this up. When we experience intense emotions, our brain's amygdala, the part responsible for fight or flight responses, activates instantly. It floods our system with stress hormones, making us feel like we need to act now. But when we take even a short pause, we engage the prefrontal cortex, the rational, decision-making part of our brain. That simple act of slowing down helps us process the situation with more clarity, more logic, and less emotional volatility. Some of the greatest leaders, negotiators, and communicators in history have mastered this. They don't just react to what's happening around them. They give themselves time to think, to assess, to ensure that their response aligns with their greater purpose. In high-stakes situations, whether it's a difficult conversation, a major decision, or an emotionally charged moment, the pause becomes a tool for strength. It prevents us from saying things we don't mean, making choices we'll regret, or allowing temporary emotions to create lasting consequences. But here's the challenge. Pausing doesn't come naturally. We are wired for immediate action. We want resolution now. We want to defend ourselves now. We want to fix the situation now. And that's exactly why learning to pause is a skill, one that requires practice. It starts with awareness, recognizing when emotions are driving your reaction, feeling the impulse to respond immediately, but choosing instead to take a breath, to count to 5, to ask yourself, what outcome do I actually want here? It's in those moments that we reclaim our power, because when we pause, we don't just change the conversation, we change the trajectory of our decisions, our relationships, and ultimately our lives. We live in a world that glorifies emotional attachment. We're told that to be a good friend, a good partner, a good leader, we need to feel everything with the people around us. We need to absorb their stress, take on their frustrations, and carry their burdens as if they were our own. It sounds noble, it sounds like the right thing to do, but what happens when we internalize the emotions of others to the point where they become our own? We've all had moments when someone walks into a room with a bad mood and suddenly we feel irritated too. Or when a friend unloads their stress onto us and we carry it with us for the rest of the day. Or when we spend time with someone who's anxious and we leave feeling anxious ourselves. This isn't connection, this is emotional entanglement. And over time, emotional entanglement leads to exhaustion. It drains us. It blurs the line between our feelings and the feelings of others. It makes it impossible to tell whether we are acting out of our own values or simply reacting to the emotional state of those around us. But here's where many people get stuck. They think the only way to protect themselves is to disconnect completely. They believe that the only way to avoid emotional exhaustion is to shut down, to numb themselves, to build walls so high that nothing and no one can get through. That's not emotional freedom, that's emotional avoidance. Because the goal isn't to become cold, indifferent, or emotionally unavailable. The goal is to remain connected without becoming consumed, to engage with others, support them, and be present without letting their emotions dictate our internal state. And that requires a skill that few people talk about: detached compassion. Detached compassion is the ability to care deeply without carrying the weight of someone else's emotions as if they are our own. It's the ability to listen to someone vent without absorbing their frustration. To be present for someone in pain without taking on their suffering. To support someone through a difficult moment without making it your responsibility to fix it. It's understanding that just because someone is drowning doesn't mean you have to jump in and drown with them. You can still throw them a lifeline, you can still offer support, but you can't save someone by sacrificing yourself in the process. This is especially critical for leaders, parents, and anyone in a position where people rely on them. The best leaders don't carry the emotional weight of every single person on their team. They create space for emotions, they acknowledge them, they offer guidance, but they don't take on the burden as if it's their own. Because the moment they do, they lose the clarity and objectivity needed to lead effectively. The same is true in relationships. In any partnership, whether romantic, professional, or platonic, there will be moments when one person is struggling while the other is in a good place. And in those moments, it's natural to want to help. But helping doesn't mean absorbing. Supporting doesn't mean suffering alongside them. It starts with awareness, recognizing when we are internalizing emotions that don't belong to us. Paying attention to that subtle shift when we go from listening to absorbing, noticing when someone else's mood begins to dictate our own. It requires boundaries, not walls that shut people out, but boundaries that protect our own emotional energy, boundaries that allow us to be present for others without losing ourselves in the process. And it requires a mindset shift, the understanding that we can deeply care about someone without needing to fix them, that we can be fully engaged in their struggles without making them our own, that we can be a source of strength for others without depleting our own. This isn't easy. It takes practice. It takes self-awareness. It takes constant reminders that our role is not to carry the emotional burdens of the world, but to show up, to support, and to lead from a place of clarity rather than exhaustion. Think about how you react to stress, to criticism, to uncertainty. Do you shut down? Do you get defensive? Do you seek approval? Do you avoid conflict at all costs? Now ask yourself, where did that reaction come from? Most of us assume that our emotional responses are just who we are, that the way we handle pressure, the way we deal with difficult people, the way we process disappointment, these things are simply part of our personality. But that's not entirely true. Many of our emotional reactions are not conscious choices, they are patterns. Patterns that were shaped by our upbringing, our experiences, our past relationships, and even the environments we grew up in. If you were raised in a home where conflict meant shouting, you might have learned to associate disagreements with danger. So now, as an adult, you avoid confrontation at all costs. If you are constantly told to be tough and not show weakness, you might have learned to suppress your emotions. So now when something upsets you, you push it down and pretend it doesn't exist. If you only received praise when you achieved something, you might have learned that your worth is tied to your accomplishments. So now you feel anxious anytime you're not doing enough. These emotional patterns become our default settings. They become the automatic scripts we follow, often without realizing it. And because they feel so natural, we rarely question them. But here's the thing, just because a pattern was created in the past, doesn't mean it has to define your future. Your emotional blueprint is not permanent. It was written for you, but it can be rewritten by you. It starts with awareness. The next time you feel an intense emotional reaction, whether it's defensiveness, insecurity, anger, or fear, pause and ask yourself, where did this reaction come from? Is this really how I want to respond? Is this pattern helping me or is it holding me back? Most people never stop to ask these questions. They simply react the way they always have, assuming that's just the way they are. But the moment you start questioning your patterns, you create the opportunity to change them. Think about a time when you overreacted to something minor. Maybe a small piece of feedback felt like a personal attack. Maybe a slight inconvenience made you irrationally frustrated. Maybe someone's silence made you feel rejected, even though they weren't ignoring you at all. Why did it hit so hard? Chances are it wasn't just about that moment. It was about a pattern, a past experience that wired your brain to react a certain way, a belief that developed over time, shaping how you interpret situations. Once you recognize this, you have a choice. You can keep living in these old patterns, repeating the same emotional cycles, feeling the same frustrations over and over again, or you can rewrite the script. You can start responding with intention instead of reacting on autopilot. You can teach yourself new patterns that align with who you want to be rather than who you were taught to be. This doesn't mean suppressing emotions. It doesn't mean forcing yourself to feel differently overnight. It means learning to process emotions differently. It means challenging old narratives that no longer serve you. If you've always feared failure because you were taught that mistakes equal incompetence, you can rewrite that belief and see failure as a stepping stone to growth. If you've always avoided difficult conversations because you associate conflict with rejection, you can rewrite that belief and start seeing conflict as an opportunity for deeper understanding. If you've always sought external validation because you learned that your worth depends on approval, you can rewrite that belief and start validating yourself from within. Rewriting your emotional blueprint doesn't happen instantly. It takes time. It takes patience. It takes consistent effort to unlearn decades of conditioning. But the moment you start questioning your patterns, you take the first step toward emotional freedom. And when you do that, you stop being a prisoner of your past and start becoming the architect of your future. Leadership isn't just about guiding others. It's about guiding yourself. Before you can influence, inspire, or lead anyone else, you have to master the ability to lead yourself, your thoughts, your emotions, your reactions, and your decisions. Because the way you lead yourself determines the way you show up in every aspect of life. Think about it. Every day you face moments of choice. The choice to react or respond when something frustrates you. The choice to stay focused or let distractions pull you away. The choice to push forward when things get hard or to give in to self-doubt. The choice to take responsibility for your emotions or to blame circumstances for how you feel. Most people don't make these choices intentionally. They move through life on autopilot, letting external events dictate their state of mind. They let bad traffic ruin their morning. They let a difficult coworker throw off their entire day. They let fear stop them from taking action. And then when they don't get the results they want, they look outward for explanations. But leadership, true leadership, starts from within. It starts with owning your mindset, your emotions, and your actions, no matter what's happening around you. Because the reality is, the most successful, influential people don't just react to life, they lead themselves through it. They don't wait for perfect conditions to feel motivated. They create motivation through discipline. They don't let emotions drive their decisions. They acknowledge their emotions, but they choose their responses based on their values, not their impulses. They don't make excuses when things don't go as planned. They take ownership, adjust, and move forward. And, most importantly, they don't depend on external circumstances to define their internal state. They lead themselves first. But what does that actually look like in practice? It starts with self-awareness. If you want to lead yourself effectively, you have to understand yourself deeply. That means paying attention to your triggers, what throws you off balance, what patterns keep repeating in your life, what habits are helping you, and what habits are holding you back. It means being honest about your weaknesses without letting them define you. It means recognizing when you're making decisions out of fear rather than purpose. It means understanding what motivates you, what drains you, and what drives your best performance. And once you develop that awareness, the next step is self-discipline. Because awareness alone isn't enough. Knowing your patterns doesn't change them. Acting on that knowledge does. That means choosing to stick to your commitments, even when motivation fades. That means managing your emotions so they don't control your actions. That means doing what's right instead of what's easy. And that means holding yourself accountable, not waiting for someone else to do it for you. Most people think discipline is about restriction, about forcing yourself to follow rules. But in reality, discipline is the ultimate form of self-leadership. It's the ability to guide yourself toward what you say you want, even when the path gets uncomfortable. It's easy to say you want to be healthy, but leading yourself means choosing to exercise even when you don't feel like it. It's easy to say you want stronger relationships, but leading yourself means having the tough conversations instead of avoiding them. Because at the end of the day, self-leadership isn't just about mindset, it's about action. It's about building habits that align with your goals, making decisions based on long-term impact rather than short-term comfort, and showing up as the person you want to be, even when no one is watching. And here's the truth. If you can't lead yourself, you won't be able to lead others. You can't expect your team to be disciplined if you lack discipline. You can't expect others to stay calm in a crisis if you panic under pressure. You can't expect people to trust you if you don't trust yourself. The people around you are always watching, whether you realize it or not. They don't just listen to what you say, they observe how you live. And the way you lead yourself sets the standard for how you lead everything else. Leading yourself first is not a one-time decision. It's a daily commitment. It's a continuous process of self-awareness, discipline, and intentional action. It's about recognizing that leadership doesn't start when you have a title or a team to manage. It starts with how you manage yourself. The choices you make each day, how you handle challenges, how you respond to emotions, how you stay true to your values, shape the trajectory of your life. And the more consistently you lead yourself with purpose and integrity, the more naturally leadership extends into every other area. Your work, your relationships, your influence on the people around you. Because the truth is, leadership isn't about power or control, it's about responsibility. And the first responsibility of any leader is to master themselves before expecting to lead others. So ask yourself, are you leading your emotions or are they leading you? Are you controlling your habits or are they controlling you? Are you shaping your future with intention or are you waiting for circumstances to decide it for you? The answers to these questions will determine not just the kind of leader you become, but the kind of life you create.